Hey there, welcome to ATL and 29, a podcast that looks at the NBA from the starting point of Atlanta. My name is Kevin Chouinard. I'm here with Tyler Jones and Glen Willis. We're recording on a Tuesday night, uh, shortly before the start of the NBA Finals. Maybe we should start there. What are you looking forward to out of these finals, gentlemen?
Well, I hope there's no hard fouls or like any extra elbows because we don't want that in our basketball. So uh hope it's a clean game and everybody and everybody's nice to each other and they shake hands and and they're like just great sportsmen because that's what we want in sports these days. So that's what I'm looking for. What about you?
Well,
Yeah, looking forward to. All right, the famous phrase, "Let's have a nice, clean fight." Right?
Yep.
That's what they say at the tip off of a WNBA game. Way people talk about it.
Nah, I just I don't want to talk too much about the W. I'm a big WNBA fan now. Been
Same.
for the last like really since the last 4 years, give or take. But uh, like it's a physical league. Like that's really all
Right.
I just want to emphasize. And like women's sports in general is just way more like it's honestly way more physical than men's sports. I've especially watching my sisters play contact sports. It's just a for whatever reason, it's just a lot more physical. And so like what Caitlin and what these rookies are going through is not only is it just a basketball thing, but it's just tethered to the sport, like the culture of the sport, which is uh grounded physicality, if that makes sense.
and
Yeah, I
WNBA
mean,
rookies have it tough because they just go from the college season to the pro season
yeah.
with no break. Like that's just a different beast.
No
I,
break, and
and
everybody's playing for a roster spot because there's only
Yeah.
so many good players not in the W right now just because there's only 12 teams. So uh
it,
well,
yeah, it's funny because if you go watch games live, right, your average NBA game, your average WNBA game, for me, like the women compete more consistently.
yep,
Right. And the NBA is 82 is a different schedule. It's a different thing, right? So I'm not being trying to be critical. But in the NBA, you see more kind of pick your spots, game gets close to the end, the intensity comes up. Somebody's losing by 15 points, so they decide, okay, now we got to elevate our defensive intensity. And where you go watch a WNBA game, and it's like competitive from start to finish, all
yep.
the way through. And I enjoyed that aspect of it. It's like there's a number of different aspects I enjoy, but that's one of them.
Well, unbeknownst to either of you two, I reached out to our friend, mutual friend Wes, to see if he would do some episodes of this podcast where we talk about the dream. So uh,
Be great.
I have to do more homework, and I'm going to let the NBA finals, I think, go past first,
Yeah.
which I want to talk about today, the NBA finals. But I do want to sort of get more into this as we
Yes,
move
I mean,
along here.
I think it's one of the more interesting matchups in a while for me, and it's kind of funny because like if you look at the way like casual observers or casual watchers, meaning a person who's not a fan of either the Celtics or the Mavericks, like there are reasons to find both of these teams kind of annoying, in their own
Yeah,
way, but the matchup is fascinating to me. I was talking to Caleb on 19 on the game over the weekend, and I said I think I lean Mavericks in seven because I just think they play with more force and they're more aggressive and more assertive, where Boston relies on precision and they try to space you out with their five out and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, Horford will go try to mix it up. But he's just not as big as Gafford and Lively, and I don't know what Kristaps has. I mean, he's not one that really wants to play physical, and he's a floor spacing big man, a skilled big man that does different things than the physical stuff. And it's just gonna be interesting to me to see how Boston can deal with that. Now, Boston can spread you out and make 18 threes in a game. It's hard to beat the point total that they put up. But for me, like and we talked about it before, but having Kyrie as your second, offensive kind of creator is just insane. It's just I mean, to have that
Yeah.
sort of in your back pocket whenever you might need it is just it's just crazy. And when I was talking to Caleb, he and I were talking about the fact that Kyrie had to learn to do this exact thing with LeBron years ago. And so it's not like he's never done this before. If you had to pick one guy in the league who probably did this thing he's doing now better than anybody, that I can kind of think of, I think it's him, and to me that's such an advantage, for Dallas. I mean, Boston's statistical profile this year is like a historical outlier. I mean, it's just a crazy good statistical profile. But when I try to think through how they deal with how aggressive, assertive, and physical Dallas is, I have a hard time envisioning how they handle that across, a series that I think goes 7 games. So I'm looking forward to it. And I think it's gonna be fascinating. I think both teams are well coached. I think both teams know who they are, know what they're good at, know what they want to do. And it's just going to be a matter of who can kind of take something away from the other that they're trying to kind of use as a primary mechanism to kind of control the game, whether that's pace or physicality, or whatever that is. So I I think it's going to be hard fought all the way through, but I think Dallas wins it in the end.
I'm gonna go with Celtics. And I just think the Mavericks are going to have a hard time with Derek White's drives to the rim, especially if they're playing, the 5-out scheme. Like it's just like Derek White's the quote unquote weak link, but he's really not. And like I can see a scenario if especially if the Celtics aren't bogging down in isolation and they're getting their dribble penetration, like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are getting dribble penetration. Like I can see Derek White off the weak side just brutalizing the Mavericks with paint touches and drives to the rim and finishing at the rims. Like, and also his shooting. Like I think I to me I just think the Celtics, like, I just think they have so many good basketball players. Like they really just only need, like, because of how high end they are, they really only need two of those guys to really pop. For them to kind of, I think, kind of run away with it. I just, I don't know. Like I respect what the Mavs has done, have done in these playoffs, but it kind of does feel like it's the Celtics' time. Uh, they've had the easier path throughout the playoffs, and like I can see a fatigue factor coming into play as well with the Mavericks. Just even though the Timberwolves series was pretty short, um, I just think like overall the Celtics have been a better team all year. They have they have the better shooters across the board. It's just going to be tough for the Mavericks to keep up with them unless Doncic is like going off nuclear the entire series. And like the Celtics, for all like we've been talking about their flaws for a couple of years now, but like they have perimeter defenders in spades. Like they just and they're not like I'm there's no doubt in my mind Luka's gonna go off, but I feel like when Luka gets tired, will the Mavericks have enough outside of Kyrie, if that makes sense? Not because Kyrie's been brilliant. Like Kyrie's probably the Mavericks X factor, but I can see if the Celtics are able to play the Mavs bigs off the floor, I think they're in trouble. So I think that's like uh, if Gaffer's just a non-entity just because of the spacing the Celtics provide, like I think that can hurt Kyrie because then like the Mavericks are just smaller. Like if they're having to go with PJ Washington at center, I like more often just to like match up defensively. I feel like the Mavericks going to lose a big advantage of lob rim finishing from Lively and Gafford. I'm comfortable with Lively defensively, but Gafford for all his strengths, I think kind of worries me in this series. Like he's the type of big in particular who struggles against the Celtics spacing scheme. So it's going, like, I think it's going to be an interesting series, but I just think the Celtics are just the better team, like just outright. So I'm going for them. I kind of sneakily hope Al Horford wins the ring. He's deserved it for his career. Like I, he's probably not a Hall of Famer, but like he's one of the best Atlanta Hawks I've ever watched. So I hope since these are coming up to be some of his last years, I hope he gets one before he retires. So
Yeah, I was going to start with Horford because like our podcast tagline is that we start with Atlanta first and Horford being the ex-Hawk. I think he's kind of an interesting focal point. I think he just turned 38. I don't know if it was today or yesterday. Sometime this week he just turned 38. And to me, Tyler sort of framed it as maybe the Mavs will be worn down. To me, I just don't know if the Celtics are going to quite have a rhythm. And for me, Porzingis is paramount in that because he's missed so much time. Like I just don't know. Okay, well, how do you get Kristaps up to rhythm? Like, is he going to have the shooting rhythm that makes him so unique? Is he going to have the defensive, the reps for his defensive rhythm? Like, is that all going to work with him, or is he going to be rusty from sort of a physicality standpoint because he's never the most physical player? So to me, it feels like so much of this series comes down to Al Horford because I think Porzingis is going to be a little bit of a question mark. I saw a stat the other day that Derek Lively's played more postseason games than Porzingis, which is like hard to wrap your mind around, but it's true. It's like 16-14.
yeah, Porzingis had a tough career. Like
Yeah. And so, I just think a lot is gonna fall on Al, and that's a hard matchup when it's Luka. Like that's just for all the
yeah,
great perimeter defense that the Celtics have, they don't have it with size. They're not big at center. Drew and Derek White aren't the biggest guards that you can just kind of put on Luka. And so how they defend Luka when they maybe aren't going to be all that sizey because of Horford and what there usually is their defensive strength. Like I'm a little bit worried, and I think it's going to be more of a rust thing for the Celtics than it is a fatigue thing for the Mavericks. And so to me, I'm looking forward to the Mavericks. I think the key is, what the Celtics are good at. They've got to take Kyrie out of the series as much as possible, and maybe they can wear down Luka, and maybe it can be a rust thing. But man, it's going to be hard. I sort of like Dallas, and I think Lively's a big deal. It's crazy that he's just a rookie, but I think they have an advantage at center. I think he just Glen brought it to they play with more physicality, and to me, Lively's a big part of that.
yeah, and the Celtics don't have that banger,
No,
like a Bruno Fernando type to throw out there. But yeah, I mean, I see that, but like to me, um, I don't know. Like I think I think the Celtics have had a funny playoffs where everybody's weirdly disappointed, even though they've only lost 2 games and have never been threatened to lose a single series all playoffs. But like I do think the Mavs will test them, and the lively point is real. I just think if man, if Jason Tatum can bottle it a bit and not go off the reservation as much, and they stay like they trust their structure and their system, like the Mavericks aren't a perfect team. Like they do have, especially the non like I think they're gonna put real pressure on um uh the Mavericks auxiliary players to beat them on open 3-pointers first, because that's kind of what the Celtics do. They force you to prove that you're going to make jump shots from your not elite 3-point shooters,
yeah.
and then they'll adjust from there. So it could
I
the series could come down to like PJ Washington continue to just destroy teams from the corners. Like that could be the series. So I
yeah, it's interesting to think through what the Celtics might do on because they rely on switching a lot typically,
yep.
right? That doesn't bother Luka at all. right? Not at all, right? So that's there. So do they blitz him? Do they, do they try to get the ball out of his hands? And if you think back to what the Wolves were doing, they were letting basically Gafford and Lively catch the ball in the short roll right at the nail and really not putting a body on them, letting them kind of have to make a play. And the Celtics are not going to do that. Like I think the Celtics are going to, if they do blitz Luca, have him give the ball up. I think they're going to let those guys catch the ball in the short roll. But I think they're going to go try to create a turnover right away and go
Yeah.
pressure those guys in the short roll where the Wolves didn't do that. And then it's a little anti-Celtics, but I don't think they're going to let PJ Washington shoot corner three. I think they're going to chase him off the 3-point line. I think they're going to chase Derek Jones Jr. off the 3-point line and make those guys make a play on the move and
Mm,
trust I mean, they're so good in their rotations on defense, the Celtics, right? They're maybe the best at it,
Right.
And so I just think they're going to like really try to force the Mavs to scramble on offense by kind of putting them into motion and making their lesser offensive players make plays on the move. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can make that work. But I think they're not going to live with PJ Washington getting 11 corner threes a game or whatever number he was getting against Minnesota. They're going to chase those guys off the 3-point line, and then for me, it's on the Celtics. Like this may seem like a tiny thing, but can Peyton Pritchard play in the series like at all? I don't. I just.
is he making his
I
threes or not?
But man, they are gonna hunt him on defense, and
Uh,
he's gonna have
well,
like nothing.
Can he play when Luca sits?
7 minutes a game. What? How
Yeah,
much is
like
that?
not a ton. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and
No, I know.
or does Missoula go down to literally like a 7-man rotation? I mean, this could be interesting to me because the Celtics are so prescriptive, right? They don't vary from their approach. Their formula is the same all the time. That's what they do. That's what they're about. But what the Mavs present, I think, is going to challenge that approach that they take, where like this is what we do. And it's just going to be fascinating to me to see, like, I mean, like Xavier Tillman learned how to play very physical basketball in his time in Memphis, but he's 6'7". Like, but I mean, like if they need somebody to just go like be physical with those guys, it's like he's the only guy on the team I think that just kind of knows how to like he has a wide body, and you'd think he has no place in this series, but there might be like one stretch of one game where they need someone to go just kind of, mix it up like down in the paint. And so on the Celtics side, it's just going to be so interesting because I think the Mavs will adjust on the fly. They will make adjustments. The Celtics are like, no, this is what we do, and it's just going to be interesting to see if what the Mavs do force the Celtics to do something different than really, really had to do this year, which is get off their plan. And that's going to be one of the most fascinating aspects of the series to me. Can Missoula coach through changes, adjustments on can because that's not what the Celtics do. They go back to the basics. They go back to the basics. They go back to the basics. Spread you out, 5 out, attack space, et cetera, et cetera. And I just don't know if that's going to be enough. But maybe by the end of game two, we'll have an idea of whether it's going to. I mean, the team that can force the other team to kind of do something different first, I think will get the upper hand in the series early on, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
The physicality is going to be the key. Like I just think overall, like who's going to be the more physical team because, um, you know, like I just go back to Derek White and now Drew Holiday. Like they're going to get after it for the full however long they're in the game. Like those, they are relentless
Yep.
and man, there's just something about like I just it like to me like the formula is pretty simple. As long as the Celtics are generating the better quality shots, like overall make or miss, I just think they have enough defensive talent on their team uh to at least like plug a hole for 2 minutes and that'll be the margin of victory. Like that'll be the game because that's kind of what they did with the Pacers, where they would turn it up for like a minute plus stretch and flip the game on its head. So I can see like they just have so like I just look at the Celtics roster like it's just it's not deep, but they're just so like they're so talented, and they're talented in ways that other teams aren't equipped to deal with. Like they it's just hard to deal with Derek White being the fifth option, more or less. But he's like hyper efficient. He doesn't miss open threes, and he makes the right decision every time. And like if the Mavericks are going to put a bet, like if the Mavericks are going to try to hide Luka on him, he's going to get after him like on offense. He's not going to give him a break. Like and so like I'm wondering. I'm I, I'm interested now. Granted, I'm probably not going to watch the games just because I'm a hater. uh, I'm not going to watch. I'm probably just going to box score watch because I'm not trying to. I'm in the W baseball mode right now, but like I don't know. I might catch a fourth quarter, but it's just a personal preference of mine. If the Hawks aren't in the playoffs, like if one of my favorite players aren't in the finals, I'm not that interested. But I am intrigued by the end result just because, like I said, like Al Horford is still one of my favorite players of all time. But
Yeah, pro Al Horford here. I know that's not how all Hawks fans feel, but
they're
whatever.
still mad about that tweet, man. They are
I
still
know.
like,
So, but the thing is like you said earlier, like about Boston playing the Mavs big, like you can't play drop against Boston's five out.
yeah,
You can't. You can't. So it's gonna. That's the interesting aspect to me is how do they navigate that? So and do they just like well, we're gonna roll with PJ at center for some of this some of this time. I think that's gonna be plan C for them. Maybe I think they're gonna probably have a plan where they try to kind of see if they can kind of make it work. But I mean, Boston will chew up your drop with their five out if you decide that's what you're gonna do. Unless you just play it, unless your rotations are completely perfect.
I wanted to, Glenn made a couple of points. One was that, he thinks that Dallas, is going to try. I'm sorry, that Boston is going to try to make Dallas have Derek Jones Jr. be a playmaker and PJ Washington be a playmaker and things like that. One thing that works in their favor, if that happens, is that like at the end of year 6 of his career, like Luka has gotten a lot better at sort of finishing the play, even when he's off the ball. Like if he gets forced off the ball, he's better at relocating now than he was earlier in his career. Like he's not just sort of taking the play off or taking himself out of the play. Like he will force the issue and relocate to the right spot and keep the play going. And so, I think between that and the fact that Kyrie is such an incredible number 2, I think that I don't like the idea of Derek Jones Jr. trying to facilitate, but if it's just a straight line drive, like I think that it's still kind of scary that Dallas can do a lot there offensively, because if Luka gets the ball a second time with the defense not quite set, that's a great opportunity for Dallas.
Yep. And if you're scrambling to Luca late, good luck getting the rebound.
Yeah.
Should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Should be fun. What do you all make of the fact that the intel on the Hawks is so limited to this point? Like nobody has. It seems very speculative. There's very little of it. It just seems very quiet from the Hawks front. Is that a good thing? Is that a sign of inactivity? Is that a sign that everything has been sealed up because they don't want anybody knowing anything? And that helps them if they want to trade down or something like that. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a normal thing? Like, what do you make of the lack of intel on what the Hawks want to do at this point?
well, if I can go first with how this draft is, it would it's to the Hawks' advantage to not tip their hand on what they want to do. Like, let the other team speculate what the market is, and then the closer we get to draft day, maybe you get an additional asset or two if you want to trade down, or you just get more information from other teams, like because their frustrations will leak out maybe what they're looking at or what they're looking for, and then you can plan your off season accordingly. Because, um, I mean, just put a macro view on the NBA right now. The Mavericks went from uh out of the playoffs to the title, and they might win it, you know. And so,
They
like
took a
to me,
tanking fine.
they took a tanking fine, and they got the 10th pick, and then they took the 10th pick and salary dump to get the 12th to get Derek Lively. And like my thing is, I feel like every team now, probably from however good or bad externally the media thinks they are, a lot of teams probably feel like if we make a couple moves on the margins here, we can upgrade this, and this. Like, just take the Hawks for example. I've said this numerous times. Look, if the Hawks can fix their defense, they're title contenders.
Yeah.
It's that simple. But the question is, for the beginning of the season for the Hawks, they were literally one of the worst defenses in NBA history. They weren't the worst because there were teams that were below them, but they have got to figure out a way to fix the defense. And we've speculated on how the Hawks can fix their defense, what they need, what they don't need, et cetera, et cetera. But like overall, big picture, if you have the number 1 overall pick and you got a bunch of trade assets that you're willing to move on from, it should be doable this offseason. So, like, but the issue the Hawks currently have right now with that plan that I just laid out is that there are other teams in the same position that the Hawks are. The Pacers want to get better. The Kings want to get better. The Pelicans want to get better. The Clippers want to get better, even though they're limited. The Suns want to get better, even though they're limited.
Grizzlies.
All these
Grizzlies
teams
want to
that
get
are
back. Yeah, Grizzlies want to get back in the mix.
Grizzlies want to get back in the mix. Like, all these teams want to get better. The Rockets want to make that. The Rockets feel like they are one more guy away from being contenders, even with all the young players in their plan. Like, they went into the last offseason. They were like, we're going to fix our defense. We're going to spend X amount of dollars on Dylan Brooks. We're going to spend X amount of dollars on the centers that ultimately aren't better than Sengun, but will give us an option to close games sometimes. We're going to spend on Jeff Green. And like over the course of the 82-game season, the Rockets got better and better until all of a sudden Jalen Green had a mini breakout. And then you could see, well, we're getting stops consistently. We have all season with these defensive improvements we've made. Now that Jalen Green's kind of going up, can we build off this? And the Rockets have more assets in the Rockets and Pelicans and the Thunder, who finished with the 1 seed. They want to get better. Like every team wants to feel like, man, we just need one more guy, or we need to change the flow of our roster and our scheme. So I feel like this offseason, you're just going to see so many teams trying to get better that it's imperative that the Hawks keep as many advantages that they have, since they're pick poor. You know, they're out picks, and so they can't just trade multiple picks to get a player back in return. You know, they have to manage, okay, what can we lose this offseason? What can we gain? And so, like, to me, just overall, like, combined with the fact that, you know, this draft doesn't have that superstar elite talent at the top, like it just behooves the Hawks for like the other 2019s to fall in love with one player and be like, we want to move up, we want to give up more to improve our roster, and maybe that gives the Hawks the opportunity to improve theirs with the additional assets, if that's an avenue they want to go through. I'm skeptical of that. I think they're just going to take the pick, but like, you know, you don't want to take this offseason is so vital for them. They cannot take any options off the table like they have, you know, in previous off seasons where they rushed to the DeJounte Murray table without scanning the rest of the league. Like, I mean, we forget about this. Like, the Hawks day 1 trade for DeJounte Murray, day 2 Kevin Durant asked for a trade. That's brutal. That was like that. You know, the Hawks didn't have the assets ultimately to get KD, but like, you know, that's brutal. Like, you took yourself out of the running because you don't have the picks anymore. Donovan Mitchell asked for a trade, or the Utah Jazz put Donovan Mitchell on the market. Like the trade, Donovan, backcourt defensively probably has similar issues to what we see with Trey and DeJounte, but offensively, that's a much better fit. So, um, like it's just they need to be. That's my large point is like they just need to be patient and trust the scouting work that they've done over the year and like their interviews that they're doing, all that good stuff, and like not be so because they've been very talk like the bad thing about the Hawks in recent years is they've been very talkative because it's been pretty obvious to the other 29 teams what the Hawks want to do. They want to get off John Collins because they don't want to pay the tax. And so like it just ate at their leverage every trade deadline every season where it's like, well, we know you guys want to trade them, so here's what you're getting, which is below market value. Now they're in a situation with the John Collins trade where they still do have tax concerns, but they're not as pressing as they were, and it's very easy for the Hawks to get under the tax. And so like other teams can't use that as leverage against them, if that makes sense. So I didn't mean to ramble the whole time.
No, you're good, man. You're good.
It's a fascinating.
That was like
Also,
a good 6 minutes.
Yeah,
all right,
if you didn't ramble, we'd be sending somebody to check on you, Tyler. But it's all good. That's all good stuff. I mean, the other thing I think people forget about is teams that are dealing with a second apron. That's going to create a little bit more of a market for players, teams that have to move players they wouldn't normally want to move, right? And so that's another dynamic that's different than it was just a couple of years ago. And it's going to be interesting to see if that has an impact on draft night or ahead of draft night. When I try to kind of figure out, like you read a little bit from Gavoni, a little bit from over here, a little bit from over there. I mean, the Hawks are, pretty quiet, but it seems like, if I had to guess right now, it seems like they're going to take Klingon. That's just my guess. Risa Shea is just he's an interesting young player. He's not even 19 in 1 month yet. I don't think, or just maybe a couple months or something like that. But he had a birth. Maybe his birthday was in May.
April,
So
April
oh, in
birthday.
April. Okay. So, but I mean, like, he's not strong right now, but like a lot of guys who are 6'9", 6'10" at 19 years old aren't yet, and so, but it's just interesting to think about that. And then Sar, we've talked about it. You've got to project a lot of offensive development for him to pan out as a guy that has a career that looks like most guys who were taken first in the draft, where Klingon may not have as high of a ceiling as either one of those guys, but he's kind of ready on day one. And what comes back to there is the medicals about the foot issues. That's always scary. He's 270 pounds, foot issue. I mean, we've seen what's happened to Embiid, which kind of all started with the foot, and now it's knee and this and that, and all that sort of stuff. So, and then I'm curious if they would love to trade back and take Holland. Um, because that's the kind of defensive wing that they need. And I think Holland is probably the best defensive wing prospect in this draft. But I think that this is me speculating again. I think they're like, if we're going to trade back, I want a starting level wing that can defend, and trade back not so far that I can't get Holland, because they're not one defender away. They're not
Nope.
two defenders away.
Yeah.
They're three-ish defenders away from fixing the defense, and that's important to think about this being a multi-step process they have to navigate.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm lower on Holland, but like the larger point is they want a starting caliber. Like if I feel like they're going to trade the pick or trade more like a trade down in the lottery. They want like some starter caliber wing in return for that that trade equity. So that's why there might be some radio silence. The thing about drafting Klingon is it gives you there's a level of sureness that you can trade Capella and maybe even a Kongu as well, and um not feel like, okay, I'm setting the defense back, if that makes sense. And I can use those guys as assets instead of having to trade them because of tax concerns or like playing tax, but it more like, hey, these guys are valuable players, good players, and we can trade them for stuff we can use to build around clinging. So, whereas like to me, I've been clinging. I just think we talked about the other pod, but like to me, it's just there's a level of there, there's a level of safeness. Whereas Sar, he just hasn't played enough, and so like I don't see the organization where the Hawks are right now, in the fact that they have to win. Like so many people's jobs are on the line, and so like that's where they could still take Sar, but they have to nail everything else perfectly. Whereas I think with Klingon, the Klingon or trading down and doing whatever, like there's a bit of they give themselves a little bit more breathing room. Like, okay, we if we make a mistake here, but we made another trade over here, or we made another acquisition over here to help us, and like trading down or trading Capella and a Kongwu or whatever could give them a little bit more breathing room to make mistakes, because teams are going to make mistakes, and like at the end of the day, nobody's going to know how five guys on the floor are going to play together until they play together. We can estimate, but like we just don't know how the chemistry amongst those five will work until they see the floor together.
I still think all their decision making swings on how they really feel about a Kongbu.
Yeah.
I think that's the primary thing here. It's hard to know.
Klingon reminds me a little bit, and this is oh, that is bag of worms for another time. I can't open that at this point because it needs a whole lot of explanation. So we've got multiple weeks left before we have to stop talking about this. So
you want
we can get into it?
No,
we can get into it.
Yeah, sometime soon.
All right.
All right.
Good night,
Good night,
Bob.
Bob.
Good night, Bob.